I'm DIANE MACEDO. Today on ABC News Live, federal authorities are now tracking the chain of custody of top-secret documents seized from former President Trump's home. A lawyer for Trump signed a declaration weeks ago saying no more classified documents remained in Trump's possession. Why the case is now raising national security concerns as the FBI warns of threats to its agents. Plus, we have new details on SALMAN RUSHDIE's condition after his brutal stabbing during a speaking engagement. What his family is saying about how he's doing now and what we've learned about the suspect. And Afghanistan 1 year after the U.S. withdrawal. As the Taliban celebrates Victory Day, the Biden administration's plan to help at-risk Afghan allies still in the country. But we begin with the new fallout over documents allegedly seized from former President Trump's Florida home. ABC News has learned that law enforcement now has to track the chain of custody of those top-secret documents to see if any of the material was compromised. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas is in Washington with the latest.
New concerns over the potentially extraordinary risks to national security posed by the discovery of classified information allegedly seized from former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. ABC News learning that top law enforcement officials must now try to track the chain of custody of those national secrets in an urgent effort to find out if any of the material allegedly taken from the White House was compromised.
How long were they kept at Mar-a-Lago? How many people potentially had access to them while they were kept at Mar-a-Lago?
The investigation will likely include interviewing former Trump administration officials and may even involve checking for fingerprints on the recovered classified documents to better understand who might have had access to them. The Justice Department warrant unsealed Friday raises a prospect of espionage charges and obstruction of justice, revealing 11 sets of recovered documents ranging from confidential to secret, top secret, and even top secret SCI, meaning that it came from intelligence sources and could involve nuclear secrets and information about terrorism operations. SCI material often involves intelligence from allies, spying, electronic eavesdropping, or informants. It's supposed to be viewed only in the most secure designated locations and by officials with the highest security clearances. Federal security protocols flatly state the compromise of top-secret material creates the potential for exceptionally grave damage to national security. Among the critical questions federal investigators are expected to address, exactly how was it that so many boxes of highly classified material could be removed from the White House in the first place? Who moved it? How was it transported to Mar-a-Lago? What were the security protocols there, if any? The breadth and sensitivity of the material causing political shockwaves in Washington.
One side is going to say that this is just politically motivated and weaponization of the Justice Department, but it's also very serious charges about very serious crimes.
The Justice Department had been negotiating for these documents for weeks, eventually subpoenaing them. ABC News also learning that in June, a Trump attorney signed a statement telling federal prosecutors all classified documents at Mar-a-Lago had been turned over after the FBI visited that month. And ABC News confirming that in June, security camera footage from Mar-a-Lago was subpoenaed and turned over by Trump. It's unclear how long that footage covers and what it shows. Many security officials are expressing utter shock at this situation, and they remind that these types of national security secrets are exactly the kind of information our adversaries run spy operations to steal. DIANE?
All right, Pierre Thomas, thank you. Meanwhile, the FBI is warning about rising threats against law enforcement after the Mar-a-Lago search. An FBI bulletin mentions multiple specific threats, including calls for the targeted killing of the judge who approved the search warrant. Senior national correspondent Terry Moran has the latest. Hi, Terry.
DIANE, it's an extraordinary warning. The FBI, joined by the Department of Homeland Security, issuing a stark bulletin to state, local, and tribal law enforcement right across the country. And it warns of, quote, an unprecedented increase in threats and acts of violence directed at FBI personnel and other government officials after that search at Mar-a-Lago. These threats are erupting online, on pro-Trump social media and other online platforms, and some of them are very specific. This bulletin cites a, quote, dirty bomb threat directed at the FBI headquarters right behind me here in Washington, and there are calls for the targeted killing of judicial and law enforcement officials who were involved in the Mar-a-Lago search. All of this coming just days after an armed suspect was shot and killed by police outside the Cincinnati field office. The FBI saying that calls for armed rebellion and civil war are increasing by the day. Diane?
All right, Terry Moran, thank you. And let's bring in ABC's Zohreen Shah in Washington, along with senior investigative reporter Aaron Katursky and attorney Jeffrey Robbins for more on this. Jeff, what kind of evidence would prosecutors need to bring charges on the potential violations mentioned in this search warrant, including the Espionage Act?
Well, it looks like they've got the evidence, Diane, and good morning to you. We have been treated to quite a spectacle. There are 5-year-olds who could come up with a better set of excuses than the ones we've heard over the last 5 days. There's the O.J. Simpson defense. Somebody planted not a bloody glove, but nuclear secrets. Happens all the time. We packed too quickly, and so naturally nuclear secrets or documents related to nuclear weapons happened to be thrown on top of the suitcase. There's the I waved my hand while eating a cheeseburger and declassified everything defense. And when you ask for any evidence that any such order was ever given, well, you know, the dog ate that, so it's sort of the hungry cocker spaniel defense. We have so many shifting stories, and those stories actually reinforce the significant body of evidence that's already in place, given the circumstances of what occurred here, that what happened here was in fact willful and knowing and not simply some little accident.
Now, Aaron, how do security clearances work for former presidents? Is Trump within his rights to review these documents after leaving the White House?
After leaving the White House, no, Diane. We understand that President Biden was so concerned about former President Trump and some of his erratic behavior and statements as he saw it, that he rescinded the security clearance that he would have had as president. And it's up to successors to determine whether former presidents are able to see certain classified materials, certain intelligence. Sometimes they're called upon to assist in a given situation and maybe given a security clearance for that. But as far as we understand, the White House says that former President Trump did not have authorization to be in possession or see these documents because his security clearance had been rescinded upon leaving office.
Now, Zohreen, Republicans have called this a political move by the Justice Department, pointing to the midterm elections being less than 3 months away. How could these investigations affect the political landscape?
Yeah, I mean, it's striking that the de facto leader of the Republican Party could face legal consequences, right? And could potentially soon before announcing his own 2024 bid. I mean, look, so much of the midterm so far has revolved around him, around Donald Trump, who he endorsed, if he endorsed someone, the proxy wars between him and Mike Pence. And now you have this. So the big question is impact. And I should say in the last hour or so, you had the chair and the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee sending a private letter to the director of the National Intelligence, and they requested classified documents seized and an analysis. And it comes, of course, after Marco Rubio. He wrote that letter to the FBI director. He's demanding questions. He, too, appears to have those 2024 ambitions.
Aaron, how's the FBI explaining that timing, that the search happened as we approach the midterms?
Well, for them, it may not necessarily matter. Generally, they try to stay away from politically sensitive times, but the former president is not running in the midterms, and they seem to be so concerned that he was in possession, or at least these documents were at his home, that they wanted to retrieve them as quickly as possible. They had tried through other means, less intrusive methods. They had issued subpoenas. They had sent agents down to the former president's estate in Palm Beach to try and collect this stuff. You heard Pierre say that there had been an attorney who swore that there were no more classified documents there. Instead, though, they felt like they needed to move in and take this stuff using a search. And they had viewed security camera footage that they had subpoenaed from Mar-a-Lago, and that footage may have raised concerns that there were people who had access to this material, given how and where it was stored, that should not be able to see it.
Now, Jeffrey, a Trump attorney signed a statement in June saying all of the classified documents had been turned over. Obviously, that's not the case. So how damning is that?
That's very damning. Number one, it has potentially serious consequences for the lawyer who signed that false certification. It places her ability to continue to represent him in serious jeopardy. It raises a serious question whether or not she actually will be a witness against him. And it suggests, as your question suggests, that there was a false certification by the Trump team to the federal government about whether or not they continue to hold on to these documents, which is going to be quite likely more evidence of intent to violate the law.
All right, Aaron Katersky, Jeffrey Robbins, Zoreen Shah, thank you all. And we're learning some new details now about Salman Rushdie's condition after he was stabbed multiple times while giving a lecture in Western New York. His son says his father is recovering from what he calls, quote, life-changing injuries. As we learn more about the suspect, Mola Lenghi has the latest.
This morning, signs of hope for author Salman Rushdie after a brutal attack. His family encouraged that the 75-year-old author is off a ventilator and able to speak. Rushdie's son, Zafar, writing, though his life-changing injuries are severe, his usual feisty and defiant sense of humor remains intact. Life-changing injuries including severed nerves in his arm, a punctured liver. Rushdie also likely to lose an eye after being stabbed Friday morning just before speaking at a lecture series at the Chautauqua Institution in Western New York. Authorities say Hadi Matar, a 24-year-old man from New Jersey, rushed the stage and attacked the author, stabbing him at least 10 times before finally being tackled by several people attending the event. Rushdie quickly airlifted to a hospital in nearby Erie, Pennsylvania, where he underwent hours of life-saving surgery. Prosecutors say the suspect, who appeared in court Saturday, pre-planned the attack, obtaining an advance pass to Friday's event, arriving one day earlier, carrying a fake ID. Henry Reese, also injured in the attack, was on stage with Rushdie.
I mean, clearly the attack had some motivation. What the motivation was, I don't know.
Investigators describing the attack as an assassination attempt by an individual with strong indicators of ideological support for the Iranian regime. Among the images investigators found on the suspect's phone were photos of Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in a U.S. drone strike in 2020. Rushdie targeted for murder by Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini in 1988, who issued a fatwa after Rushdie published his novel The Satanic Verses, a book the regime considered to be insulting to Islam. After going into hiding, Rushdie granted his first live interview to ABC News.
I think probably the worst part has been not knowing how long it was going to go on for. I think if somebody had said to me, you know, here's a jail sentence, it's going to be 2 years, then it's over, I could perhaps have dealt with that. It's the open-endedness that's been difficult.
Well, the suspect facing second-degree attempted murder and second-degree assault charges. He has pleaded not guilty to those charges and is being held without bail. Diane, he is scheduled to be back in court at the end of the week.
All right, Mola Lenghi in Erie, Pennsylvania for us. Thank you. And multiple new attacks have been reported at a nuclear plant in Ukraine. This comes as the country's nuclear agency is now reiterating that the shelling there is raising serious safety concerns. Now the G7 is calling on Russian forces to withdraw from the area. ABC News' Britt Clennett is in Ukraine with more. Hi, Britt.
Diane, multiple attacks at the Zaporizhzhia power plant once again overnight. These rockets striking just several hours after 42 countries called on Russian forces to leave the plant, which is actually around 50 miles from where I'm standing. Ukraine's nuclear agency once again warning that the shelling is seriously risking safety. One of 3 power units are now disconnected. And as we know, in addition to this, the plant's monitoring sensors have also been damaged. Residents are trying to flee the Russian-occupied areas as they join the exodus of more than 500 vehicles built up at the last checkpoint that crosses into Ukrainian territory. Diane?
All right, Britt Clennett, thanks for that. Coming up, the Taliban is celebrating the anniversary of its fighters taking over Kabul. We're in Afghanistan with a look at the country 1 year after the U.S. withdrawal when we come back. Welcome back. It's been 1 year since Taliban fighters closed in on Kabul, taking control of Afghanistan's capital as the president of the country fled. Thousands of Afghans, many who worked with the U.S. and its allies, made their way to the Kabul airport in fear for their lives, desperate to flee. The U.S. military evacuated more than 130,000 people over the next 2 weeks, but not everyone made it out or made it out alive. ISIS suicide bombers killed 13 U.S. service members and more than 170 Afghans in a coordinated attack at the airport. Now the Taliban is celebrating the first anniversary of its victory as the country faces an uncertain future. Our chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, has the latest from Kabul.
America's old enemy celebrating what they call Independence Day here on the streets of Kabul. It's exactly 1 year since the militants took control of the capital and the country.
These are the fighters that America spent 20 years trying to defeat. Today, they're celebrating America's withdrawal and their assumption of power here.
The scene on the ground, a stark contrast from a year ago as US forces withdrew, ending America's longest war. Today, it's Taliban soldiers patrolling the streets, many of them with US-made weapons. But most Afghans aren't on the streets celebrating. They're mourning the loss of jobs, money, or any place in society. This weekend, a small group of brave Afghan women taking to the streets, calling for bread and freedom. But this is the Taliban's response. Gunfire into the air and some female protesters beaten. I sat down with a Taliban spokesman who denies women and girls are being oppressed.
Women are being given their rights. Each society interprets rights of human beings, men, women, children, neighbors, the planet, animals, differently.
But this is the image to remember today. Not the Taliban celebrating, but babies dying from hunger. More than 90% of Afghans no longer have enough to eat. And it's the youngest and weakest struggling to survive in the new Afghanistan. 1 year after America's withdrawal lapsed into chaos, 1 year since the Taliban's victory, Afghanistan is isolated, sadder and hungrier than ever.
Diane, despite this bleak picture, there is still some hope and resistance, and it's incredible. Women defying the Taliban on the streets, girls going to secret schools despite all the risks. And the truth is, this is a very different country from 20 years ago. People are connected to the outside world. Even the militants are walking around here with smartphones, taking videos of us, taking selfies of themselves. And the truth is, the Taliban is going to have to deal with a new Afghanistan. Yes, there are broken promises, but not all spirits are broken. Diane?
All right, Ian Pannell, good to hear it in Kabul. Thank you. The U.S. evacuated more than 130,000 people from Kabul in the weeks after the Taliban took control. And so many of them left their lives behind to start over in an unfamiliar place. Our foreign correspondent, Maggie Rulli, was at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany as those refugees stepped off the plane into their new lives. And Maggie joins me live now for more on this. Maggie, thanks for coming on. Where are these refugees now, and what challenges are they facing?
Hey, Diane. Yeah, this has been such a long process, one we've been following. The last flight carrying Afghan refugees left Ramstein Air Force Base in October 30th. That's more than 70 days after those first planes arrived from Afghanistan. But, Diane, we have to remember this was one of the largest airlifts in human history. And the process of getting people to America took months. Now, we now know more than 76,000 Afghan refugees came to the U.S., tens of thousands of them through Ramstein. While thousands have been settled in America, there are still thousands of others who are still awaiting resettlement, currently living on various Air Force bases across the U.S. So, Diane, for so many today, 1 year later, sadly, the refugee journey is still not over.
Now, what kind of support is the U.S. providing these refugees?
You know, last year, Diane, there was overwhelming support from Americans to help refugees from Afghanistan. Polling showing that 81% of Americans from both parties thought the U.S. should welcome those fleeing the country. And immediately, things like temporary shelter and aid were given. But many nonprofits now say that when they went to help refugees resettle in the U.S., they were overwhelmed by just the sheer number of people arriving that needed help. And many refugees have now come out saying they faced a lack of help finding housing and jobs here in the U.S. Now, Diane, add to that in the past year, we've also seen huge numbers of Ukrainian refugees who need help, and resources and attention from these Afghan refugees continue to be dwindling.
Now, State Department data shows that as of last month, more than 74,000 Afghans are still in the process of applying for special immigrant visas. How complicated is that process? Why is this taking so long?
Yeah, Dan, exactly. It's very complicated. It's often described as a cumbersome and meticulous process that can take years to complete. Now, the special immigrant visa was created actually well before the Taliban came back into rule last year. It started back in 2006 as an immigration program to help people who helped the U.S. government in Afghanistan or Iraq get permanent residence in America. But the application process is slow. NGOs who help with the process say only around 3% of Afghans who qualify for the visa have been resettled, and Tens of thousands of others are still waiting to be relocated from countries where they've temporarily found safety. And recently, the Secretary of State addressed this issue, saying the State Department has now taken over handling these visas, and the process is now moving much faster than before. But Diane, right now, for those thousands, it's been a year and they're still waiting.
Maggie Rulli, the wait continues. Thanks for staying on top of it for us. Coming up, the new job trend known as quietly quitting and how it's redefining work-life balance when we come back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. 8 people, including at least 5 Americans, are wounded after a gunman opened fire on a bus in Jerusalem yesterday. That's according to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, which says a pregnant woman was among those injured. It happened near the Western Wall, one of the holiest sites in Judaism, where Jews from around the world come to pray. Actor Anne Hesh has passed away. Her rep confirmed that she was taken off life support on Sunday evening, more than a week after a devastating and fiery crash in Los Angeles by car. The Emmy-winning actress was known for her roles in 6 Days, 7 Nights and Wag the Dog. Anne Hesh was 53. And a new trend is sweeping the internet in the name of work-life balance. In a story we first saw in the Wall Street Journal, so-called quiet quitting is all about stepping back without actually leaving your company. Chief Business Correspondent Rebecca Jarvis has more.
Today, I want to talk about a trend that I've been seeing all over the internet, as well as heard from a few of my friends, which is quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting, the new trend redefining work-life balance for young professionals everywhere.
Quiet quitting is just it's about quitting the hustle culture that goes along with work in our society. I can still be a very productive, active worker and not have to focus on work 24 hours a day.
The hashtag quiet quitting seen over 3.5 million times on TikTok alone.
I just heard about this term called quiet quitting, and I realized that is what I've been doing against my will.
This new form of quitting happens when workers mentally step back from the burdens of work, working the bare minimum number of hours and not making their jobs an important center of their lives.
When I was quiet quitting, I didn't want to constantly feel that stress of working that job and feeling like I needed to put my 1,000% in. So I decided to scale that back and really just do the work that was required of me.
And with COVID-19 blurring the lines between home and work, many now using quiet quitting as a way to set more boundaries between their professional and personal lives.
I was really struggling with the idea of just a 9-to-5, especially when COVID hit and we were all working from home, and I was just stuck at my desk all day from 9 to 5 at a minimum, working on my computer, staring at a screen. For me, that just wasn't the ideal situation.
The trend of putting limits on the job popular among those in their early 20s.
Being connected to a mission or purpose is a high priority for the younger generation. That's something they want, but they're not experiencing it in their current workplaces.
And just having a little me time. Our thanks to Rebecca Jarvis. You can stay with us as ABC News Live continues. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.